Welcome to this meeting of the Licence and Appeals Committee. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber and these members will be voting on the proposals this evening. Other members of the council who are also present in the chambers or participating via MS Teams can take part in discussions, ask questions, but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted. Before we start the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call. So if we could have the members roll call. Good.
You just confirm that you're present for your name. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Councillor Tunstall.
Present.
Councillor Banks.
Present.
Councillor Bennison. Councillor Brown, we've had a from Councillor Cope.
Present. Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Kears.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor King. Councillor Lark.
Present.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Roud.
Present.
Councillor Taylor. Present. We may have had apologies. Councillor Thorneyworth. So you have 8 voting members present this evening.
Thank you. If Alison, if you could ask the officers' names and titles, please.
Along the top table, perhaps at the end, and start with Crispin and work down.
Thank you. Crispin Kennard, Interim Regulatory Services Manager.
Hi everyone, Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing and Health.
Alison Paris, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
The ground rules. This meeting will operate under the ground rules as set out on pages 5 to 7 of the agenda pack. We now go to the apologies. Again,
Can
please.
just remind everybody of the apologies we've received from Councillor Brown and Councillor King.
Declaration of interest. Anybody? Nope. Right. Schedule 4. We'll go to the minutes. Notes of the meeting to be held on the 10th of June 2025 are confirmed as correct and recorded. Members will agree to them. Great. Agenda 5, minutes of the panel. To agree the minutes of the meeting of the Licence and Appeals Committee sitting on as a panel on the 23rd of June, 30th of July, 6th of August and 13th of August. If there's no questions, can we be noted? Matters of, right, review of licensing fees and charges. We're now going to have a report from Crispin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a review of the licensing fees and charges for 2026-27. The responsibility for setting the licensing fees and charges is with the Licensing and Appeals Committee. And this report gives details of the proposed fee 627. These fees have taken into account a set of guiding principles for the setting of fees and charges. Those are section 2. Just to say that they reflect the Council's strategic priorities and other corporate aims in recognising there may be trade-offs. They are not mutually exclusive. Fees and charges should have due regard to the Council's medium-term financial strategy. If there is to be a subsidy from the Council taxpayer to the service user, this should be a conscious choice. Council should look to maximise income subject to market conditions, opportunities comparable charges elsewhere in the context of its strategic priorities and other corporate aims. Fees and charges should normally be reviewed at least annually unless fixed by statute or some other body. Fees and charges should not be used to provide a subsidy from the council taxpayer to commercial use. There should be a consistency between charges for similar services. Concessions for services should follow a logical pattern so as not to preclude, where appropriate, access to council services on the grounds of ability to pay. Attention has been given to fees and charges applied by neighbouring, where direct comparisons are available. These are included in Annex 1 as a members' consideration. So just to say that the council has the power to set some fees for certain licensing regimes. However, a number of regimes have fees that are set by specific acts or associated regulations. So in the table, you will see there are 3 types. Type 1, a fee set by statute for which the council has no power to amend. Type 2, a maximum fee cap set by statute that permits council to set up to a maximum. And type 3, the relevant statute permits councils to set their own fees locally that will enable it to recover its reasonable costs. So just moving on, the council is following this decision. So we also have to have regard for the European Services Directive, and there has also been a judgment by the Supreme Court that established a licensing regime may operate on the basis that an applicant must pay on making an application, known as Part A, and the cost, which includes the cost of the application process, and then Part B on successful application being a further fee to cover the cost and running of the enforcement. So the council has, following this decision, reviewed the Type 3 regime fees for which the directive relates, so that they identify the costs for processing the application throughout Part A and the costs for running the enforcement Part B. That is reflected in the table in 1. So at Section 5, there is a brief representation of the summary of number of licenses and then on those respective dates. So most recently, that's reflected on the 27th of October this year. Just in relation to the Licensing Act fees, these are set by government and haven't changed since the Licensing Act was introduced, and the table at 5.4 represents the current income from those Licensing Act fees that we currently receive. Under Section 6 of the report, you'll see Hackney Carriage and private hire fees. These are subject to various statutory controls, and whilst these controls provide the council with some discretion as to the level of fee, the cost of a licence must be related to the overall cost of the licensing scheme itself. Section 53 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act provides that in respect of Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers, the council may charge such a fee as to consider reasonable with a view to recovering the costs, issue and administration. So for vehicles, both Hackney Carriage and private hire operators licence fees levels are governed by Section 70 of the 1976 Act and allows the council to charge such fees as may be sufficient to cover in whole or part the reasonable cost of conducting inspections of Hackney carriages, private hire vehicles for the purposes of determining whether such a licence should be granted or renewed, the reasonable cost of providing Hackney carriage stands, and any other reasonable administrative or other costs in connection with the above. Section 70 of the Act also provides that should the council determine the fees to be varied, they shall publish in at least one local newspaper a notice setting out that variation and allowing a minimum 28-day period from the publication of the notice. So should members agree to the recommendation of this report, the notice mentioned in section 6.4 will be published as soon as possible, and any objections received reported to the committee in March 2026 for consideration prior to the new Hackney Carriage and private hire fees coming into force on April. Then just to confirm, the table showing existing fees for this financial year and the proposed fees for 2026-27. There is also Annex 2, a fee model which details how officer costs, time in validating, processing and issuing and enforcement costs, where applicable, show how we have arrived at those. Just to confirm that the risk assessment, the recommended fee levels have been calculated in order to ensure the service remains self-financing whilst at the same time not making profit. And consultation and communications as set out in sections 6.4 and 6.5. The agreed taxi fee increases will have to be published for taxi stakeholders to make comment objection. If any objection is made, these will be considered at the next licensing scheduled for the 25th.
Thank you. So the recommendations set out at 3.1 on page 35 of our pack proposes that the scale of fees, licenses, contents and registrations as set out in Annex 1 be adopted from the 1st of April 2026. I'm going to propose that. Can I have a seconder? Keith? We have a show of hands, or do we all agree? Agreed. Agenda 7, sex establishments and sexual entertainment venue policy. If we can have another report, Crispin, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is in relation to the sex establishments and sexual entertainment venues policy review for 2026 to 2031. The current policy on licensing sex shops, sex cinemas and sexual entertainment venues has been reviewed. There's been no legislative updates. However, the following recent case law, it's proposed to consult on renewing the current policy, which will then run for 5 years. I won't go into specific details in terms of the background to this specific policy. It is in place. There are no proposed changes. It is proposed to consult on renewing the existing policy, and the reasons for the policy are given through reports. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? No. The recommendation sets out at 3.1, page 69, asks the members to approve the policy attached at Annex 1 for public consultation, and that the objections be brought back to the committee for discussions in March 2026. And if there's no response received, policy approval should be delegated to the Director of Planning, Housing, Environment and Health. I'm going to propose that. Can I have a seconder? Do we all agree? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda 8, Street Trading Policy 2026 to 2029. Over to you, Crispin, again.
Thank you, Chair. A very similar situation to the previous report. This is on the street trading policy review for 2026-2029. Current policy on street trading has been reviewed, and it's proposed to consult on renewing the current policy will run for years. Just to add to this, that the current policy was first introduced in 2023 and expires next year. Owing to staff resources, we have yet to implement the street trading consents detailed, as the licensing team have not been able, staff resources has prevented from doing this. It is with the current changes to the licensing team and the move to the planning, housing, environmental health team, we hope to be able to review the situation. So plan is to renew the current policy and then bring that into fruition in the course of it.
Thank you. So the Street Trading Policy Review 2026-2029 29, the recommendations set out in 3.1, page 117 of the pack, ask members to approve the policy attached at Annex 1 for public consultation, and that any objections be brought back to the committee for discussion in March 2026. And if there's no response received, policy approval should be delegated to the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health. I'm going to propose that. Do I have a seconder again? Everyone agree? Agree? Agenda 9, Uber private licence. You again, Crispin.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of verbal update for members, earlier this year we received an initial application from Uber Britannia Limited for a private hire vehicle operator's licence to operate in the borough. Having received and validated all required documentation and on receipt of the relevant fees for a 5-year operator's licence, was granted on the 19th of September in line with our taxi and private hire policy. As with other operators' licences, there is an option to add more vehicles if required in exchange. Prior to validating and granting the licence, representatives from the licensing team met with regional representatives from Uber to discuss the process and how Uber intend to operate within the borough. Assurances were given that the granting of a licence to Uber will not mean we see an influx of out-of-town drivers. Uber operates a system which will accept and allocate jobs to the most local and appropriate driver via the correct operator licence. Uber have also confirmed that their drivers will not be permitted to use their own operator's licence on the Uber platform, and they do not engage in subcontracting. Therefore, any trip offered to a TNBC licensed driver would be operated under the TNBC operator licence. In recent weeks, Uber have informed us that they have now begun their onboarding process for drivers, and it is expected a number of current Tunbridge and Malling private hire licensed drivers will join them, the operator attracting new applicants as well as attracting new applicants to the borough. Currently, the licensing team are receiving just such a number of inquiries. All new applicants will be required to go through the same process as existing drivers and those not currently working for Uber. They will start with the council's knowledge test before progressing to the application stage, where they must provide sufficient evidence of their right to work, driving experience, also complete online training in safeguarding and disability equality, a driving assessment, medical, and finally a satisfactory DBS response. Once they are deemed a fit and proper person to hold a licence, it will be granted. Finally, Uber do not licence their own vehicles, and all drivers will be using their own, which will also be licensed by Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council and will be required to meet our policy standard.
Thank you. I'm going to put it out to all our committee if you've got anything to say, but I'll start with Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually more of a question than something to say. From Eleanor Hoyle's email, it basically sounds like it's not something that we can necessarily even take a position on as councillors. Like it's a legal process, and that whatever any of us think, this is what has to legally happen. Is that correct? Have I understood that correctly? Thank you.
Yes, all the correct documentation was received, so we had no reason to object to the granting.
Anybody else? Councillor.
I think Councillor Cope sort of covered some things, but I think I'm very unhappy about this, because I think the whole thing is that there's so many great advantages with I suppose, new technology and the way basically that the billing process, everything about it is done. But it's part of the gig economy, and I think the whole thing is, I'm old-fashioned enough to think in terms of, I hate the idea of monopolies. I hate the idea of anti-competitive trading, and I look at these companies with trepidation. I also heard something on Radio 4 as I was driving along. I think we're all very familiar with surge pricing. But the way basically that Uber and some of the other companies are operating is that they the way that they pay their drivers changes all the time. It's not a situation where everyone's paid the same. And it's sort of like a reverse version of surge pricing. And the way that it sort of turns out is that if people always say yes to jobs, you would imagine that they would be people that would be favoured within their organisation and perhaps get some kind of a bonus because they are such good, basically, agents within the operation. But in actual fact, it appears the reverse is true. They actually reduce payments on people that actually do more work for them. And so it's surge in reverse. So I am not at all happy about this. And I think the whole thing is the fact that it's a legal requirement that we must accept it. I think it just goes to show how these gig economy companies are actually using monopolies. And I think we will regret it one day from the point of view of, because there was very, very good reasons in commerce not to have monopolies, because we all know what happens in the end with monopolies. The consumer loses. So we are party, I believe, in the long term for consumers to lose. Thank you for letting me speak.
Anybody else? Well, my personal opinion is the same as two councillors have said. Our hands have been tied and I'm not happy with it. Well, just want it noted that there it is, I'm afraid. Right, agenda 10, Hackney carriage and private licence policy, I mean. You may have all had emails from Terry of Castle Taxis regarding the tinted windows. I do agree with what he says, that we should definitely review this policy, because if the car's coming in, you know, under British standard, why are we not allowing it? And we've got 3 local borough councils near us that don't have this type of policy. KCC, Children's Run, don't have it. I think Crispin might be able to give us a bit more different talk on it. But I just want to know what your views are after you've read them. If you want to say anything, and should we review it, you know, to have this part of the tinted windows removed? But it's what you say. So I'll pass it over to Councillor Lark first.
Thank you, Chair. I think what's key here is the word consistency. We've got a car that's sold to be on the road, and hold on, suddenly it's not good for that. But next in Maidstone, it's fine, or in Sevenoaks, it's fine. I think we need to have, it's almost like, even if it's county-wide, national, we've got to have a consistent thing. These are cars that are coming off a production line in a huge factory, and that we know that there are tint limits in the UK, which if you go beyond them, you've had. But these are bog standard production cars coming, which are accepted in all the boroughs around us, but sometimes they are, sometimes they're not here, depending on inspection levels, etc. So I think we've just got to look at it and say we have a consistent policy, and to make sure that we're fair for everybody. All I can say.
And Councillor Oliver first.
I think it should be reviewed. I agree.
Cope.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Linda for her really thorough work when she was replying to the emails, that I could see that it wasn't something being taken lightly, that you had been consistent and fair, and I would just like to recognise the work that went in there, Linda. Thank you.
Anybody else? There's
just to support colleagues, I think it's absolutely important with local government review reorganisation taking place that this is going to have to be done in any case, because there's going to be, whichever way the unitary authorities turn out, there has to be a consistent approach. So I think it's timely that we do a review now, and I support colleagues.
Crispin, I don't know, or Linda, if you wish to say anything regarding this.
Yeah, just to confirm that we will take away the commitment to review the policy and we'll bring it back. There will then obviously be a period of consultation that will that amendment.
Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. Alison, is there any urgent items?
Yeah.
Exclusion from the press and public, there's no items.
Yeah.
Right. 7:55 and I will close this meeting. All right then. Thank you everyone. Good night.